Hey there, so I just finished reading this absolutely mind-blowing book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling, with his son Ola Rosling and daughter-in-law Anna Rosling Roland, and seriously, you have to hear about it. I picked it up because I felt like I was constantly bombarded with bad news. And honestly, it made me feel pretty stressed and hopeless about the state of the world. This book promised to give me a more fact-based worldview, and boy, did it deliver. It's not just a book about statistics, it's a guide to thinking clearly about the world. And it completely changed how I see things. Hans Rosling, who was a medical doctor, professor of international health, and an amazing public educator, devoted the last years of his life to writing this book before he passed away in 2017. He co-founded the Gampiner Foundation with Ola and Anna, and their mission was to combat devastating ignorance with a fact-based worldview. This book really is the culmination of 18 years of intense collaboration between the three of them. Even though it's written in Hans' voice, they created these incredible animated bubble charts and tools like Dollar Street to make data understandable and reveal our misconceptions. The core message of the book is that the world is actually much better than we think, but our brains are hardwired with dramatic instincts that systematically distort our perception of reality. Hans conducted these simple fact tests, asking basic questions about global trends like poverty, population growth, and vaccination rates. And guess what? Most people, even highly educated ones, scored worse than random chance. He even says chimpanzees picking answers randomly would do better than most humans. It's not about stupidity, but about actively wrong knowledge. One of the first big misconceptions Hans tackles is what he calls the gap instinct. We tend to divide everything into two distinct, often conflicting groups, like us versus them, or developed versus developing countries. He shows how this creates an outdated picture in our heads of a world split into rich and poor, with a huge chasm in between. But the reality, he argues, is that there is no gap anymore. Today, most of the world's population, about 75%, lives in middle-income countries. He introduces a much more useful framework for income levels. Level 1 is extreme poverty, around $1 a day. Level 2 is about $4 a day. Level 3 is about $16 a day. And level 4 is over $64 a day, where most of us reading this probably live. This isn't just about money, it's about how people live, what they can afford, and their access to basic needs. For example, on level 1, children walk for hours to fetch water, and serious illnesses are often fatal. By level 2, families can afford some food they don't grow, sandals, and a gas stove. On level 3, they have running water and a fridge. He illustrates this beautifully with images from their Dollar Street project, showing how families across the world on the same income level have similar lives, regardless of culture or religion. This leads perfectly into another big one, the negativity instinct. We're constantly told things are getting worse, and of course, bad things do happen. But Hans points out that billions of improvements are never reported because they're too slow or fragmented to be news. He gives some astonishing facts. The proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has almost halved in the last 20 years. It went from 29 to 9, and the average life expectancy worldwide is now 72 years. That's up from about 30 years in 1800. He uses this incredibly powerful analogy of a premature baby in an incubator. Her health is still critical, but she's getting better every day. We can say things are both bad and better at the same time, without being naive or ignoring problems. This idea is incredibly comforting, like statistics as therapy. Then there's the straight line instinct. We tend to assume trends will just continue in a straight line forever. Hans gives a funny example of his grandson Mino's growth. If Mino kept growing at the rate he did in his first 6 months, he'd be 13 feet tall by age 10. It sounds ludicrous, right? But we do this with population. Most people think the number of children in the world is just going to keep increasing and increasing. But the experts predict that the number of children aged 0–15 will actually remain at 2 billion in the year 2100, the same as today. The reason the global population will still increase to 10–12 billion by 2100 is mainly because there will be more adults, as the children who have already been born grow up and live longer. This is called the fill-up effect. the number of babies per woman has dropped dramatically from 5 in 1948 to just under 2.5 today. This is a silent miracle of human progress. What about our fears? The book addresses the fear instinct. The media often taps into our primitive fears of physical harm, captivity, or contamination to grab our attention. This means we often misjudge risks. For example, the number of deaths from natural disasters has decreased to less than half over the last 100 years. Even with a much larger global population, and flying has become 100 times safer in the last 70 years, thanks to global collaboration and shared incident reports. We hear about the 10 fatal plane crashes out of 40 million safe flights, making us fear flying more than we should. This instinct makes us focus on what's frightening rather than what's truly dangerous. Hans recalls a moment when his own fear led him to make a terrible decision in Mozambique, causing drownings simply because he acted too quickly under pressure. Then there's the size instinct. We often get numbers out of proportion. For instance, last year 4.2 million babies died globally. That sounds huge and awful, right? And it is tragic. But if you compare it to 1950, when 14.4 million babies died, it's a beautifully small number, showing incredible progress. His main advice here is never look at a lowly number. Always compare it to something else, or divide it like per capita emissions or child mortality rates to get the real picture. He even gives us the pin code of the world for population. 1 for 1 billion in the Americas, 1 in Europe, 1 in Africa, 4 in Asia. By 2100, it's projected to be 1 4 5, with Africa and Asia growing significantly. The generalization instinct makes us mistakenly group people or countries that are actually very different. He shares a hilarious story about lying to villagers in Congo that Swedes don't eat larvae. Unlike Danes, to avoid eating a local delicacy, we often generalize based on stereotypes. But as Dollar Street vividly shows, the main factor affecting people's lives is not their religion, culture, or country, but their income level. People on level 2 in China live remarkably similar lives to those on level 2 in Nigeria. He urges us to look for differences within groups and similarities across groups, and crucially, to assume people are not idiots if something looks strange, as how it could be a smart solution, like half-built houses in Tunisia that act as a saving mechanism. This ties into the destiny instinct, the idea that cultures or countries are unchanging and their fate is predetermined. Haas's experience with an investment banker who believed Africa could never make it due to its culture exemplifies this, but cultures are not rocks, they're in constant transformation. African countries, for example, have made incredible progress in education and child survival, often faster than Europe did. Iran, a country often stereotyped in the West, had the fastest drop in babies per woman in world history, thanks to health and education improvements. This instinct makes us take our own progress for granted and be blind to others. Then there's the single perspective instinct. We love simple ideas and solutions. If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. This leads people to believe that all problems have a single cause or a single solution. Hans discusses how experts can become fixated on their own field and ideologues on their political ideas. He uses Cuba as the healthiest of the poor and the US as the sickest of the rich to show the limitations of single-minded approaches. Cuba prioritized health over wealth and freedom, while the US prioritized market forces in healthcare, leading to high costs and poor outcomes compared to other rich nations. The solution is not either or but both and case by case. Finally, the most dangerous one, the urgency instinct. This now or never feeling makes us want to take immediate, drastic action, often leading to stupid decisions. Hans shares the tragic story of the roadblock he advised during an unknown disease outbreak in Mozambique, which led to mass drownings. He argues that major issues like climate change, while serious, need cool-headed analysis and step-by-step actions, not fear-mongering and exaggeration, which can undermine credibility. He emphasizes that we need to insist on data to track progress effectively. So what's the takeaway? Hans Rosling wants us to embrace Factfulness, which is about recognizing these dramatic instincts and learning to control them. It means continually asking, where's the data? Why is this compared to? What's the full spread? I'm not blaming an individual or understanding a system, and is this really urgent? He says that while the world has huge challenges like global pandemics, financial collapse, world war, climate change, and extreme poverty, we have made tremendous progress, and we can continue to do so by acting collaborative and based on facts, not fear. This book is a powerful reminder that the world is not as dramatic as it seems, and adopting a fact-based worldview is not only more accurate but also less stressful and more hopeful. It makes you feel like you're equipped to understand and engage with the world's real problems, rather than being paralyzed by imagined ones. If you're someone who feels overwhelmed by the news or wants a clearer, more positive but realistic outlook, you absolutely have to read this book. It's a game changer.